Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another Unabridged Gamer interview. Today, I am sitting down with Alex Simmons, the creator
Hey,
of
hey.
Blackjack and runner of Kids Comic Con, amongst many, many other things. Because, like everyone I interview, Alex Simmons does not sleep.
No, that's true. I'm hoping to do that sometime in 2016, but I'm not sure. Trying to work it into my schedule. How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Okay, great.
How have things been with Blackjack recently? Been seeing a lot more PR stuff for that.
Yeah, I've been definitely pushing the press mill as hard as I can. There's a definite joy and exuberance and excitement and thrill and a sense of power to being an independent publisher, and then there's all the reality. So so if you have Simon and Schuster or DC or somebody like that or Abrams behind you, then they have a machine. And that PR is taken care of on that end as well as you doing your own. But when you're doing your own, then yeah, you spend a lot of time talking about it, writing about it, hopefully being interviewed about it, trying to find all the fans you've built up thus far and trying to make new ones as well. So we've been, working all of those angles from the conventions that I've been doing for the past few months to, as a matter of fact, I'll mention this again in a moment, but to the new graphic novel, which is actually a reprint of the very first Blackjack story arc that's coming out next week. Talking about that and talking about the new graphic novel series that I'm working on with Tim Fielder, which is a fully illustrated book, and that's coming out hopefully in the next couple of months. We've had some problems with
Oh, I'm sorry.
hitting deadlines. Yeah. Well, I'll talk about that in a moment too. But that's the pages we have on that are really looking gorgeous, and I'm just hoping just another few days, and we've
Fingers
got that
crossed.
one. Yeah, we got that one going. And then I'm working with my friend Chris Ryan, who's been a buddy of mine, and one of his sons is my godchild, and all that cool stuff. But Chris has been a part of the Blackjack team since the late '90s,
Wow.
and so yeah, he and I decided to sit down towards the end of last year. Started to sit down and start doing some prose tales about Blackjack. So we came out with, as a matter of fact, I have one to hold up here. We came out with this prose collection of an anthology of short stories called Blackjack Shooters, and that's 123, 140 some odd pages of action adventure globetrotting thrills, and we're working on a second anthology as a team. So we're doing alternate stories, which is fine.
Excellent.
Yeah, he does one, I do one, that sort of thing. So there's a lot to talk about, and I'm even working on something with one of my sons, which is
Oh, great.
always a thrill. Yeah, when you watch them come into the world and then they develop into their full-grown self, and they still want to spend time with you, that's a blessing. But it's also a real blessing when you realize, oh, they've acquired some skills that would help promote my work. Okay, so yeah, my son Matthew and I are working on a project, and we have some limited resource challenges there, but we're putting our brains to it, and we'll see what we come up with, and maybe have something to show in a couple of months.
Hmm, excellent. All right. And for those who don't know of your work, who is Alex Simmons?
Jeez, okay. Well, I was born in a log cabin. No, that's the other guy. Um, well, I'm an American, New York City, born and raised African American male. For those who are only listening to this and can't see it, and I've lived in New York 99% of my life, and I have a wonderful wife and three great young people who tolerate me well. I started out as, most people do, as a curious, adventurous kid. I read a lot of stuff. I watched television and movies, and eventually realized that I enjoyed telling stories, whether it was making up my own stuff and drawing them and writing them or performing on stage. So by the time I hit young adulthood, I pursued acting for a number of years, and I did that. I was an extra in films like Ghostbusters and oh boy, a whole bunch of stuff with De Niro and a few other people. No stars, no stars, just like extra background work with them. But then I did a lot of stage work, performed in musicals as well as dramatic pieces. I did a lot of voiceover work, and in that time period, again when I was a younger man. Um, the roles for African American actors were sort of limited to either some of the earlier, not necessarily full blown stereotypical roles, but we were usually background material, or we were the friend of the friend, or we were domestic, or whatever. Or the other end of it was we were the angry black man. So we were cursing people out and shooting people and getting the girls, which the latter part I don't mind, but the idea was that I knew that we had a wide range of experiences and lifestyles and stories that were not being reflected. So I started writing material for me to do in monologues and things like that. And that led to me writing a couple of plays, one of them being Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello, which went on to be produced. I was not in it. You know, I stayed the playwright on that. I originally wanted to act in it, but I stayed the playwright. But that introduced a black family, actually based on real life Ira Aldridge, who did live around that time in the 1800s and did travel from America to Europe to become a continental celebrity as a Shakespearean actor. So that play, with the mystery, with the historical aspects of it, and of course Sherlock Holmes, did well, and it got me some attention. And I realized that writing was really something that at that time was really calling to me, to do more writing and less performing. So I started doing that, and I wound up doing children's books, mystery series, articles on various artists and musicians, and some documentary pieces, and then eventually into comics. And comics started out with me doing some of my own independent projects, such as the Demon Chronicles, which I did with Eclipse, and then Blackjack, which originally I pitched to several comic book companies like DC, Eclipse, Harris Comics, and things like that. And there was a lot of interest, and I almost had a couple of deals, and then it didn't quite work out for various reasons. So I wound up producing the books myself, working with a great team of friends. And we got such great response that we did several miniseries. And then I went on to other things. I wrote for DC Batman, Orpheus Rising. I wrote a couple of Superman books, which were illustrated but not published. I did a lot of Scooby-Doo and had a lot of fun with that. And then moved from Scooby to Archie Comics and doing a lot of Archie work, which I've been doing since 2007. And now back to doing a lot more Blackjack and some other projects. So I'm an actor, voiceover talent, writer, public speaker. I'm also an arts and ed consultant because I do a lot of work with supporting literacy and validating, stimulating and validating imagination in young people, because I think that's really how anybody envisions themselves one day becoming such and such, or learning to be or do such and such, is you have to imagine that possibility to begin with. And a lot of our society has sort of beat that out of some of our kids. They only see now. And so I've become sort of a champion of that, of getting back to giving kids, hey, that thing you came into the world with, that great imagination, that curiosity, use it. It's a superpower. Go for it. So I have the Kids Comic Con, which is an entity that I created, what I call an initiative, which is a family-friendly kids comic book convention, which we've done for 9 years here in New York City on the campus of Bronx Community College. And we've also traveled with it, what we call the KCC Roadshow. So we've gone from as far north as Buffalo, New York, as far south as Miami, Florida. And one year we actually were invited to go over to the city of Dakar in Senegal, Africa. And we did workshops there. We brought an art exhibition with us called The Color of Comics. We had a wonderful conference on the campus of the University of Dakar, and we had a kids' costume parade. So basically, I'm having a lot of fun using my imagination, writing like crazy, and meeting as many people as I can.
My goodness.
Now, I can go back and speak in specifics on any of those things, but there's the overview.
Yeah, and like I said, people, this man does not sleep. I've spoken to indie devs who they take on one project, and it's like they're working day and night. You can't just do that, because even on your website you say it's always important for you to be challenged. Now I want to ask, how do you look for something to really challenge you, and why do you seek it out, and what do you decide is a challenge that is worth grappling with?
Oh, those are both good questions. There was a time when I thought that I did really go forth seeking these things, but I think really, in effect, the person that you are, the person that you become, sort of dictates what is attracted to you or what you are attracted to. I was raised by my mom in a single parent scenario, and as I already said, I'm African American. So there were certain experiences that I had as a boy that left me with certain impressions. My mother, thank goodness, was not bigoted, in her own way. And when racism has been dumped on you, it's easy to lash out and lash back. But that was not her thing, and thank goodness, for a lot of reasons, it didn't become mine either. So I was always curious about other cultures, other races, other localities, and as a young kid and growing up, poor, the best way for me to access some sort of knowledge about other places was watching television or watching movies, and that fascinated me. Human beings are these biped creatures that run around, and there's certain things that are different about each group, but we all seem to make the same mistakes, or we all seem to have folks who do certain beneficial things for their culture or the society as a whole. So to me, having an attitude about someone who's different from me just didn't make sense. So I was always curious about the rest of the world. I was blessed to have been met by, or I should say, I've been blessed to meet a lot of musicians and writers and performers of other types and artists of other types through my school years. I mean, people used to go visit schools and do performances and talk about how they got into their various careers. And yeah, we would sit there in the auditorium like we were bored out of our minds, but in reality, some of that stuff stuck. And so, here I was. I was curious about how to write stories, how to tell stories. I used to draw a lot. And I was thinking, gee, really? There's comics. Maybe I could do that one day. And my mom's never beat down any of those ambitions. She was never saying to me, no, you can't, you can't, you can't. So to me, it was like, okay, so I can try for this and I can try for that, and this looks cool and everything. And so part of it was exploring and experimentation. And I think that's something that is valid. I think with guidance and a certain amount of structure, young people or kids should be able to explore possibilities and imagine possibilities. So you take how I was raised and how I saw the world, and you couple that with what I feel has been a constricting of that permission in our society to young people at this point, and you get somebody who's gone, well, wait a minute, why are we cutting off the very way that most kids develop? And it really doesn't matter where they come from. Comics for me, again, was one of the worlds that I lived in. You could get me to the library and read novels maybe once every 4 or 5 months, and then I'd read like two or three books, and then you couldn't get me near the library again for a long period. But I was always reading comics. So I knew from my experience and from my friends that you put a comic in a kid's hand and he or she will sit down and they'll read it. And if it's a good story, they'll get more and more and more. Well, that's reading. Maybe it's not reading Gone with the Wind or Frankenstein, but it's reading. And so to me, when the industry started really not doing a lot of material for younger audiences, I saw that as a problem. And I kept trying to get people to open up to, well, wait a minute. Yeah, you can do all this adult stuff, this mature stuff, but hey, don't cut off. And they did. And I guess really when the world began to notice this was a problem was when the numbers started to fall, when they weren't selling as many books. It used to be that a Batman book or a Superman book could sell hundreds of thousands of copies. Green Arrow, even some of their less iconic characters could do 75,000 copies, 100,000 copies. When things started to drop to 20,000 or 15,000, oh well, what happened? Well, gee, you shut off the faucet. You weren't nurturing kids to be reading comics, so as they got older, they were looking for the more mature stuff. So, boom, they could care less. So I started looking for ways to put comics out there that would be accessible to kids or family, family friendly, which meant not a lot of vulgarity, if any, no nudity, or certainly none of the explicit, gimmicky garbage. Certainly not a lot of gore or mass murdering and really horrific material. It's certainly exciting adventure. You could have things blowing up and stuff like that. But there were ways to depict those stories, and there were people doing that that I wanted to have the spotlight shine on, so that more people, the kids, teachers even, could see the value of these books and could maybe begin to open up those doors so that the kids could get to them. So that was, to me, again, it's a lot about who I am, how I think, what I feel that affected the projects that I either tried to initiate or be a part of. There's more, but I'm going to stop for a moment.
Well, you can keep going ahead if you want.
Well, okay, so here's the other end of it. Again, going back to cultural influences. A lot of the early movies that I watched as a kid, things that were made in the 30s and 40s, but which I wasn't around then, thank you very much, but were on television, right? So TV was looking for anything it could, sort of like Netflix now, looking for all the content it can find. So they were showing a lot of these old movies. So I watched, Sherlock Holmes films. I watched Charlie Chan. I watched a lot of mystery stuff. But whereas Sherlock Holmes, all of the actors who were playing British or Scottish characters were either British or really good at it, or Scottish, and they were representations of the good and the bad of those cultures. With Charlie Chan or with some of the movies where Asians were the characters, Chan was, as far as all the popular films, never played by an Asian actor. Whenever we went to the Middle East, in like a serial like Perils of Nyoka or some of these other things, the characters were, again, very stereotypical. And to me, that was the kind of thing. It's like at the time I was watching it, I just sort of took it in. But when I got older and began to evaluate things, I said, well, okay, I understand that was the era. That's how you thought then, but there's no reason that we should perpetuate that. So if we're going to have, in the Middle East, we're going to have good guys and bad guys. Let's try and be more respectful of the culture, or at least represent it with a more respectful eye. Let's balance it out. It's not everybody in a turban is a bad guy. It's not everybody who's Caucasian is a superior. Let's start to look for ways of telling those stories more honestly. And that sort of led to certainly learning more about African American history. It led to me envisioning a hero who looked like myself, because that was another thing, looking at, and I love Batman and Sherlock Holmes and James Bond and all of those things that I enjoyed. I have no problem with enjoying that. But I also recognized that there were no heroes like that who looked like me. And even as I said with Charlie Chan, it was a white actor in Chinese or in makeup to make him
Yeah.
resemble Chinese. And then the real Chinese actor was, the number one son or the
Yeah.
family, right? So that's supporting characters. So I, in looking at heroes or looking for heroes that look like me, it was like if they're not there, you create them. Pardon me. Now, true, by the 60s, we had, because the civil rights movement was occurring and media began to react to that. So you had one in each show, or you had a walkthrough or something. And in comic books, we had Luke Cage. We had the Black Panther, which was pretty cool because at least he was an African hero with all these remarkable abilities and this technology. But, again, it was one of this, one of that. So I started looking at what kind of a hero did I want to create. And again, it goes back to who you are. I'd enjoyed the adventure films, the globe-trotting thrill, and the sort of the lure of that, the 40s, even though I personally wouldn't want to have lived then. But, I enjoyed those kind of stories. So I looked at, history, and I knew that we had been in that time. We had been soldiers. We've been soldiers since the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, if you want. We were explorers. We were all of these other things. So I said, well, how about I look at where we might have been at that time and what kind of a character would that have produced? And the idea for Aaron Day, aka Blackjack, came to me, and I wrote a couple of quick stories about it, and then I went and did research to back up what the era I was trying to reflect and the kind of things that he might have encountered. And that gave me even more source material to just go further with the story. And I remember feeling that I was writing a black hero for everybody. He would represent my folks, yes, But to me, it wasn't just for a black audience, it was for everybody. I wanted as many people as possible to enjoy these stories. And I was hearing from publishers as I tried to pitch it, because, initially I wanted to, do the story or do the series for maybe DC or some of the others, whichever one would, make the best offer. And not only were they not making the best offer, but they were saying that, it would only appeal to, the urban community in, like, Harlem or Bed-Stuy or Watts. And I went, oh, really? And I said, well, that's the problem, because that's not the way I see it. And I went to a number of artists that I knew in the industry at that time, successful writers and so forth in comics, and to almost the majority of them said, "Look, it's a great idea. We like this story that you did, or we like where you're taking it. I'd buy it. I'd read it. You're going to be hard pressed to get one of the industry people, the publishers, to do it, because they don't believe that that material is going to fly."
Hmm.
And it's all about the green. It's not even about black and white. It's about money. It's about the green. And so eventually, after a few false starts, we wound up producing it ourselves. I found a backer who believed in the project, and we went forward. And I pulled together a team of a couple of artists that I knew personally, but then I did a search for a colorist, and Ken Brusnak, the letterer, was already in the industry, and he was phenomenal, and I love what he did with lettering. So I asked him, and he said, sure enough. And there were a number of people. I was surprised how many people were willing to work on the project. And then the best moment was after we'd published the first book, and the reviews were coming back, which were great. They were great from so many quarters. Um, and we got some fan mail, and one of them was from Copenhagen. And I remember, and I've said this 1,000 times since, where the brothers hanging out in Copenhagen? Where's the urban community in Copenhagen, right? So, part of the joy was watching that false assumption crumble, because that's one of the things that holds society back is false assumptions. We assume something's not going to work, so we don't even try.
Hmm.
And that to me is a crippling agent. And so I was glad that we were successful with that first series. And now that first mini series, which was 3 issues, which was Blackjack, Second Bite of the Cobra, is now coming out. And yes, and I happen to have one right here with me. Is coming out in this graphic novel, this lovely graphic novel, which is being published not by me, but by Dover Publications. They came to me and they said, "We really love the story. We'd like permission to reprint it. We'll give you money. That's always nice." And I said, sure enough. And the artist, the interior artist, is Joe Bennett, who did a wonderful job on it, and I loved his covers and everything. This time around, he was busy, so Scott Hanna, who is another artist that I've known for years, and we've always wanted to do some Blackjack stuff together. So Scott did a brand new cover for the book, and you can see a much better representation online and all that. But I'm just really happy with it. We've gotten some really nice reviews on it so far, and hopefully once it hits the stores next Wednesday, everybody and his mother will run out and buy it, and then I'll be able to afford to pay for the movie. Yeah. So that's the Blackjack experience. That's led me on to write for DC to do a Batman Orpheus Rising,
Yeah.
where yes, I created a character for them for that Orpheus, who is also African American, and then Scooby Doo, where I was just able to have fun doing Scooby stories, and I got to say one of the great kicks is to grow up reading or watching these characters and enjoying them, and they were a part of your childhood, and then one day there you are in a position to add to it. That's really fun. That's really cool, because Scooby came on when I was a young kid, as did Johnny Quest and a few other things, and to work with Joan Hilty at DC, she was the editor at the time. Joan was great because she didn't say, "Oh, well, you got to keep doing the same redundant plot, just change the names." She would actually say, "Well, what do you bring to the table? What ideas do you have? What revelations can you pull into the story, which follows the format of, yes, there's some sort of supposed ghost or monster doing terrible things, and the gang has to prove that it's not. That's fine, but you could bring in new characters. You could learn something about the background of one of the regular characters. So it was fun, and I did a number actually of stories under Joan And then when Joan left, I worked with Michael Wright. He was the editor for a while. And then when Michael left, and it's nothing personal, they weren't leaving because of me. But when Michael left, then Michael Siglain came in. And so I had a lot of fun working with all three of them, and would work with them again, guys, wherever you are. Would work with them again on anything, because they're great editors. They understand how to get the best out of the writer, as opposed to making the story something they would have written.
Hmm. That actually brings us over to the next question I was going to ask was, over the years, you've worked on a lot of intellectual properties because normally, when people talk about writers, they don't usually note for if both doing working on licensed properties and working on their own. Usually, it's one or the other, and you've done both. And you've actually answered a bit about what it is about working on IPs that interests you, because, like you said with Scooby Doo, it's like you loved the IP as a kid, you loved all the stories, and now you get to make your own stuff.
Hmm.
But on top of that, why do you think writing for properties isn't always viewed the same way as creating your own stories and characters? Because that's the thing. Like when you do fan fiction and people are just starting out practicing their writing, or when you're actually doing it for work, some people don't view it as the same. What would you say your thoughts are on that?
Well, I mean, writing first off is a personal experience. Every single writer comes to this experience with a certain amount of, oh, this is how you do it. I've heard, or I've read, or I've been taught. But then there's all this stuff in my head. So I think each person approaches a project, as themselves, and how do they feel about it, and what do they want to get out of it, and are they up to it? Because there's some doubt about whether or not you can pull it off. Um, I know for me, and maybe it's because I started out as an actor, or maybe it's just my own mantra. But you got to give 100%. That's bottom line. You don't do less because, oh, well, that's not mine. So let me just knock that out. For me, I feel that cheats not only your audience, but it cheats you, because every single thing you do represents you. It represents your skill set, your how your mind works, all of those things. So to give 100%, or at least your 100%, should always be your goal. So for me, yeah, I got very excited at the idea of creating my own hero, and building that universe, that world, and doing the research that would make it richer, and telling the kind of stories I wanted to tell without, somebody sort of lording over me. That's power. That's wonderful. That's a real rush. But also, there's a joy and an excitement in doing somebody else's property well, to represent what they've created with equal respect, and hopefully joy. I mean, if you're not enjoying it, I don't know what to say to you. I mean, if you have to do it for the money, then do it the best you can for the money. Give 100%. But if you have that option of not doing it for the money, it's not like you're broke and you've got to have that next check, but which many of us do have to deal with. But I'm just saying, there's no point in taking on somebody else's property if you're going to go, I don't know, I'll do it, but please give yourself a break. So as a new writer in particular, it's good to write what you know starting out. It's good to circulate within a realm that you're comfortable with, that you're excited by, because your excitement will translate through your work. So if for me, yeah, I was doing my own stuff, and that was great. Batman, I get a chance to write a Batman story. How cool is that?
Yeah.
You know, Tarzan, and maybe this is a good example of the mindset. Um, Lovely lady, another person that I would work for at the drop of a hat, Amy Lago, was the senior editor at United Features Syndication. Now, they did Marmaduke and Dilbert and a bunch of other comic strip series. And one of the series they had under their belt was Tarzan. They'd been doing that, syndicating that for years. And I was invited to write the strip for a while, which was great. And I got to work with Gray Morrow, unfortunately, just before he left the industry and everything. I got to work with Eric Battle. We were a team on that project too. But people said to me when they found out I was doing this, how can you write Tarzan? And meaning in effect, you're a black man. How can you write what can be seen ostensibly as a racist, entity? And I said, well, one, I can write Tarzan because I have a computer and keyboard, so it's not stopping me. The next thing is I'm not going to write Tarzan the way Edgar Rice Burroughs would have, or any other person who might have a separate agenda
Hmm.
from mine. I'm not going to have the natives with, bug-eyed and running around like, oh, bad juju buana. I'm not going to do that. But I will respect that IP. I will respect the iconic level that Tarzan, the character, has reached. I know enough about his background, his history, and so forth to want to tell a piece of that story. But I will do it with a different mindset in terms of respecting the material, respecting the people that I'm going to represent. And subsequently, once you're clear where you're coming from philosophically, then you look at, well, what stories do I want to tell? What would be exciting? And you make a list of plot ideas, and then you talk with your editor. And the moment that you guys agree on that, then write that story. Or as the podcast that I do, tell the damn story. You know,
Yeah.
do it your best, do the best you can with it. Again, hopefully have fun, get charged about it, juiced about it, get that all in there so that when people read it, they get it. Whoa, oh, this, the cliffhangers and this, and it's fine. As opposed to, I'm writing Tarzan because I got to. Why bother? Really, why bother? So
Yeah.
for me, Batman, Tarzan, Superman, Sherlock Holmes, these are all iconic characters that I've known since my childhood, and to have had an opportunity to add to the canon on each of them is exciting. Give me a chance to do the Lone Ranger, and my bucket list is complete.
Mm. Interesting pick.
Well, the Lone Ranger for me was the first show that I don't think I remember thinking about it this way as a child, but by my teen years, the Lone Ranger was the first show that I watched where two men of the opposite culture, racial background, not only worked together, but rode together. They were like brothers.
Hmm.
And, if you didn't get it from the episodes, you got it from the two movies that Clayton Moore and Jay Silverheels did together. If you want to harm my friend, you have to go through me. If my friend is in trouble, if my partner is in trouble, I'm coming. Doesn't matter what the odds are, we will face it together. And as a kid, most of us had a best friend, that we were, go through school with, and maybe we play, games and stuff with in the park over the weekend. You had a best buddy. But here these two guys, they were the best of it, and then they did good stuff. They would constantly ride around the countryside helping people. How cool is that?
Yeah.
And then to be able to ride off, having done that, that was a great image. But one was a white man and one was an Indian, and they absolutely were committed to the same quest, and they were friends. And
Hmm.
I'm sure General Mills didn't care that a little black kid in New York City was, getting juiced on this. They wanted me to buy Cheerios. Yeah, which I did. By the way, I would Saturday morning, a bowl of Cheerios and bananas, sitting there watching The Lone Ranger. Still a happy memory in my head. But the bigger lesson was at that age was that two people of a different culture and background could respect each other and work together. So yeah, the Lone Ranger is a part of me, and yeah, I would love an opportunity to write him, but we'll see. I'm still breathing.
Yeah, and actually, that also brings me to my next question, which is,
Isn't it wonderful how I'm doing that?
yes, yes, it's fantastic. But in working on all these different properties, one of the things that you've highlighted a lot, I mean, when I was actually there at Wildcat Comic Con when you were giving some of your presentations, you specifically highlighted your work with Archie. But now I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the current Archie runs? Because some have been calling it some of the most daring stuff they've been doing in a while. Because they, they had the more somber miniseries Death of Archie. They've had more outlandish stuff like, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but Archie versus the Predator. Yes, those of you
Yeah.
listening, that actually is somehow happening. And they recently
Sharknado. Don't forget
rebooted the series.
Sharknado.
Wait, they did Sharknado with him too?
Archie and Sharknado.
Oh
Google it.
dear.
You'll see it. It's happening.
Oh my
Yep.
goodness.
Yep.
But
Yep. Yep.
and now they've just recently started this new series that's got a new art style and everything. And just, what are your thoughts on that? Because that's a series you had a lot of impact on once upon a time, and now it's kind of shifting up and changing.
Well, not to sound laissez-faire about it because I'm not, but everything changes. Every generation gets to affect the world around it, and those of us who hang on a long time, we get to see that happen. And sometimes we think it's cool, and sometimes we're uncomfortable. If you think about it, the Batman that I was reading in the '60s, late '50s, early '60s, is not the Batman of the 80s or 90s.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's just not. And certainly it's nowhere near the Batman of today.
Oh yeah.
It's just not. The Batman that I used to read as a young kid and even into my early teens was having fun kicking butt and taking names. You know,
Certainly,
he and
Robin.
Robin, yeah, yeah, that's right. It was like Robin Hood in that way, you know. It's like, let's bounce around there and take people out. You know, even if you forget the Adam West show for a moment, there was not a lot of, oh, woe is me and misery, and I'm traumatized and still messed up from my parents being shot down in front of me. But now there is. There's a much darker mood and somber intensity about the series. Do I like some of the stories? Yes. Do I like all the stories? Heck no. Same thing with Superman, you know, which everything is moving towards a darker hue now, because I think personally, as a society, we're sort of we're pissed off,
Yeah.
and we're sad, or we feel beaten, or we're angry, and a lot more of that is showing and coming through in our art than anything else. You know, to me, Star Trek will always be my favorite science fiction series on television and in films. Why? Because we make it. We didn't annihilate the world. The world doesn't look like it's all gloom and doom. You know, there are different species as well as races working together. And even if mankind does not reach that, damn, it's nice to see something that says we might. So, right now, going back to your original question, Archie, from a pragmatic standpoint, Archie's been publishing since 1939. And I mean publishing. They have not stopped. So whether it was reprints or new stories, since 1939 they've been publishing. And from the point that I became involved with them, which was around 2006, 2007, at that point, and I'm sorry, industry, but I got to say this: the comic book magazine editorial news region was not really paying any attention to Archie comics. You know, I mean, basically, you couldn't have paid some of these guys to do an article about Archie, and that hurts business. You know, you can't make money, you can't pay people. Yeah, eventually you're going to go down the tubes. So one of the things that changed was in 2010 when they did Archie marries Veronica, Archie marries Betty.
Mm-hmm.
Now it was a what if thing, just like Marvel's what if. You know, it was a what if. What if he married either of these two? And because of the media reaction to that, which was the external media, I mean, I know that the president, the CEO, the top editors from Archie were being pulled in all directions for interviews with everybody from the New York Times to Good Morning America.
Mm-hmm.
So then suddenly the news media of the internal comic book world suddenly went, oh, whoa, let's get this. So suddenly everybody's paying attention to Archie. The company is benefiting from all of that. And they're selling like crazy, more so now in the US, because I don't think they ever weren't selling overseas. But once that storyline sort of played out, they had to look for, well, what's the next hook? What's going to, keep this buzz going? And luckily at that time, they'd been talking with, as I understand the story, they'd been talking with Dan Parent. Dan had had the idea for a while, and they became open to introducing the first gay character as a lead or prominent supporting character, and that was Kevin Keller. And so they did that. And again, whoa, everybody went nuts. Now, yeah, Marvel did a gay thing and eventually did a gay marriage, and DC did some stuff too. Everybody handled it their own way, but here was Archie taking the risk. Now, to some degree, if you look at old Archie comics, Archie could be done as just a regular kids running around Riverdale. They could be done as superheroes. They could be done as Archie Weird Mysteries. There was a flexibility to the Archie universe already.
Mm-hmm.
So doing these things made sense to me, and it was getting the reaction they wanted. The Archie marries Betty Veronica thing, I think, worked really, really well. Michael Uslan, who produced the 3 Batman movies with Christian Bale, Uslan was writing them. He was writing the Archie marries Betty and Veronica series. And that was, again, Michael was having a great time, everybody was having a great time, and the book sold. So Archie Comics, the company, says, okay, so we got the Kevin Keller thing rolling. We'll see how that goes. What else can we do? Well, let's keep the Archie what if thing going. So they did a series called Life with Archie. They did it in a magazine format size, and they tried some other things, and Paul Kupperberg jumped on that, and Paul did a great job. And this was, what if Archie and the team actually had made it through college, graduated, and here they were as young adults setting out on their careers and starting to build a family. What would they be like? What would work? What wouldn't work? And let's go a little bit more One Tree Hill and have some teen angst in there that people can really relate to and pull in a new market, get new fans. Because again, it was about making money so the company was sustained, and writers and actors, or not actors, but writers and artists would have an opportunity to keep working. So that did fairly well for a couple of years there. And again, they got to look for the next hook. Well, zombies wouldn't go away.
Yeah.
Because Walking Dead and all these other things, it wouldn't stop. It wouldn't go away. You couldn't kill it. So what was the natural outreach? They were already talking with some people in LA. They wound up with a remarkable director, and that person said, "Hey, I'd love to write some Archie, and I'd love to do the zombie thing. I think there's a great hook in that." And you got Afterlife with Archie, which is extreme and intense. I don't know if you've seen the books.
I've seen some stuff. I saw a preview on Kotaku, and like you said, how they brought in a gay character. They actually had a full relationship, actually, in Afterlife of Archie between
Oh
the two
yeah,
characters.
oh yeah, oh married and everything, and
Yeah.
Life with Archie, as well as in the classic Archie, which is what I call the tone, the comic books that have the original tone to them.
Hmm.
In the classic Archie, he's quite full blown there in their world. He exists as just one of their other characters, and it's great. But what I'm saying in effect is, and again, it's a long way of answering your question. The zombie scenario, the Afterlife with Archie, it's Walking Dead meets Archie.
Yeah.
There's no tongue in cheek. There's no, an elixir that makes them look like zombies. No, these folks are dead, and people are dying, and people are being eaten, and it's pretty gory. And although it's not a series that I would be involved in, and just because, not because I wouldn't write horror, just it's not what I would want to do with Archie,
Yeah.
but it is extremely well done for what it is. It is well written, well paced, and every decision that the writer has made regarding certain characters, supporting and otherwise, is, believe it or not, true to what's been tickled in the Archie universe. So these two characters have been acting like this in the Archie world. Well, if you put them in this world, yeah, that is the way they would react. Oh, wow. Okay. Ooh, disturbing. But yeah. So it's for another audience, a completely different audience.
Yeah.
So my reaction is, I would love to be able to continue to do work with Archie Comics. I'm doing some short stuff with them. Originally, some time ago, I did the cartoon life of Chuck Clayton, where I took Chuck, was a character they created back in the 70s. And he's the go-to guy for comic art. He wants to be a professional comic book artist when he grows up. And he's really a good artist and all that. And I did a lot of stories, and I had a bunch of others in mind. So I would love to be able to continue working with that. I did some adventure tales with them and using a lot of their other supporting characters. I would love to do a few more of those things. There's a road trip story that I would love to do, and there's a project involving, well, let's just say, a celebrity iconic team that I would love to be able to do something with down the line. Whether I'll get the opportunity, I don't know. Because, going back to what you mentioned, there is the new look to Archie. This first issue's just come out, and as I believe I read in the promo material just the other day, I believe they've sold out of the first issue.
Wow.
I'm not sure. You can check that. So if that's the case, okay, immediately what they've wanted to do is happening. People are interested. They're grabbing it up to check it out and see what it's like. What it'll be like, I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. I think, and this is just a judgment call on my part, or my opinion, I feel, or I think, that the classic look should stay around, because it's the look that great-grandparents, grandparents, and parents, as well as older kids, know and can introduce other kids to.
It's
And
iconic.
there's generations that are connected by it. And it's an area of comics that younger kids can enter safely and comfortably and be stimulated to read and have fun and all of that. And it's going to keep a lot of really good cartoon comic artists working.
Hmm.
All right. I do feel that there is a need for Archie to continue to grow and blossom and try new things because our society is changing, for the better or the worse is a whole nother discussion. But most assuredly, it's changing. And as a business, you need to keep trying to build an audience. And I understand and support that. Um, I don't know, as I said, what this new look is going to be. But I have faith that if they try some new things, as well as don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, that Archie Comics will be around for another 50 years.
Hmm. All right, and
Like I said, long-winded answer there.
well, that's fine. Those are the good answers. Those are the great answers when you can get something long.
Okay.
Now, going from there, you've had a lot of your work with educational elements. As you said, you have a strong emphasis on, enriching in your everything you've been doing, and adding educational value stuff that's interesting. That's not
Mm.
boring. That you actually want to do it. Do you feel that you specifically lean towards some of the more historical periods and stuff like that to enrich your stories, or is that just what you've been doing right now? Is there something else you'd like to really, add into your stories for an educational value that you haven't done yet?
Oh, well, there's a lot of stuff. I'm going to shift this. You see, there's a file cabinet there.
All right.
That file cabinet behind me, there's a whole bunch of plots and things in there that I haven't even begun to work with. Some is science fiction, some of it is supernatural, some of it is slice of life or humor. My feeling is that I like to do some historical fiction or fiction that involves looking back at the past because there's so much stuff that hasn't been touched on. There's a lot of stuff that we can gloss over and ignored. And again, if you talk about, people of color, there's a lot of material that was improperly represented or not represented at all. So there's a great opportunity to fix that to some degree, or at least to do my part in trying to address that. But I think I have to look forward. I have to not only look forward for my own sanity, but also, because there are other stories to tell and there's other audiences to reach. If I want to tell stories that involve suggesting or supporting or hopefully inspiring people to go for their dreams and to be excited about undiscovered countries and territory and the possibilities of science or whatever, then I need to tell those stories. My friend Chris Ryan also said something similar to that. It's like creating the world that you would like to exist. So yeah, I mean, it's another reason why I like the Star Treks is again in a way, Roddenberry created this world that I truly do hope will exist one day. Um, Isaac Asimov did some wonderful writing, and there's Clifford D. Simic, who's also a science fiction author, wrote a number of future tales where somehow we didn't completely destroy the planet. We didn't, completely violate and trash the environment. Somehow, either if we messed it up, we fixed it, or it went, oh really, and it took us out a bit, and slowed us down enough so that it could heal. But either way, there's Out of Their Minds and the Werewolf Principle and some of these other stories where the future Earth still you can go fishing someplace. There's still blue sky. There's things that help us as the human animals that we are remain connected to reality and time and people and place. And so I would like to do some stories that reflect that. And I have one science fiction story, a series actually, which I'd love to do, but I'm going to start as a collection of short stories, which I'm eager to get to. And if I play my cards right, I will start working on it in August, the first story. So I can't tell you what. But again, it speaks to our sort of ignorance and indifference regarding our environment and also our arrogance about ourselves as a species. And the idea is to have fun with it, but also to tell futuristic tales that I hope deliver a good message. Entertainment, but with a solid message.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question.
Hmm.
I am not locked in the past, but I certainly feel that it has not been plumbed
Hmm.
sufficiently.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, specifically even in on the game industry side of things, a lot of people have actually been kind of rolling their eyes at just how much future stuff they've been seeing. And there's actually been some requests for historical stuff. Actually, there's been a lot of stuff. I'm surprised how many people are interested in like seeing the Civil War be covered actually as a game or something like that.
Mm.
So it'd be nice to see more historical stuff out there and see some non-Fallout style,
Yeah,
future.
apocalyptics. Yes, no, I'm tired of, yeah, really tired of that. You know, and the funny thing, because you just mentioned the Civil War thing, some of the video games that are very popular, and I'm not talking about Call of Duty where they're out, annihilating another country, but some of the games that sort of seem to form around specific battles in Japan back in the past, or again some of the battles of the Civil War or the Revolutionary War. I'm wondering if any of that appeal is aside from the look, the backdrop and the costumes or uniforms or whatever.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if some of that is the clarity. There's a line in 3 Days of the Condor, the movie,
Mhm.
where two CIA men are talking. One is a seasoned veteran who's been with the organization since the OSS World War II, and the other one you can tell is an agent slash bureaucrat who's been with them probably through the Korean War and stuff like that. And at one point, the younger man is saying to the older man, "Yeah, you were involved in this in the OSS. You must miss the action, don't you?" And the older man takes a deep breath and lets it out, this heavy sigh, and says, "I miss the clarity." And I think that's about you. You basically, when you look back, or certainly if you look at World War II, you have it's easier to tell who the bad guys are.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
def.
it's so much easier. Now there's a lot of gray areas, a lot of convoluted information, and it's like your mind's tired at times. Who do you point fingers at? Maybe nobody, maybe this person. Who knows? Jesus Christ, where can I? Oh well, how about these guys? I mean, we're still to this day. It's 2015, and he's still doing movies where the Nazis are the bad guys. Why? Well, because we knew they were bad guys from a historical perspective, so we can use them. That's simple. So I don't know. Maybe that's a part of it. It's just a guess. That's all it is.
I
Just a
can
guess.
definitely see that. I could definitely see that. That definitely was a lot of actually what people were talking about with the most recent Wolfenstein because did this whole alternate history for 1960s, but it still is very much everybody kind of realized that yeah, you know what, Nazis. Those are really easy enemies to work with, not private military corporations, not fictional new countries butting heads. This is a lot easier to wrap your head around. He's a
Yep.
Nazi. He's a bad guy. I don't feel bad for
There
firing
you
bullets
go.
at him.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. There's a great line in well, it's a moment. It's a great moment in Captain America: Winter Soldier,
Oh, yeah.
when Nick Fury and Cap are having that discussion in the helicarrier, and Nick is showing Cap all of these floating war machines that they're going to send out to protect the world from any possible bad guys and bad things. And basically, so you got this vision of these things going out there and hovering above the atmosphere all around the globe with their guns ready to fire at anybody who steps out of line. And Nick is saying this is going to guarantee, this is freedom, this is going to guarantee freedom. And Captain America says something to the effect of, no, that's not freedom. I know what freedom is, and that's not it. And it's being a man out of his time. Steve Rogers knows what he believed in 1939, 1940, when they were about to go to war with the not with the Germans per se, but with the Nazis and with Hitler.
Yeah.
He knew what he was going to fight against, and maybe Mussolini and was joining up with him. Maybe the Japanese Empire was joining, but we knew who were the aggressors, and we knew our job was to go push them back. And he was okay with that. He knew what he was fighting for, and freedom had a different meaning for him. And when he stands there in what is our day, looking at our interpretation of freedom, he goes, "Hell no, that's not it."
Yeah.
And so again, clarity.
Hmm.
Just don't make excuses for doing the wrong thing. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah, it's like he actually
we'll see.
actually sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but that makes me think back to
No, no.
what he actually said in the first one. He says he doesn't want to kill Nazis specifically. He just doesn't like bullies. That's what he says right there. That's what tells the scientist guy that hey, this guy is the right guy, and then we see that come back again. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I said this before. I think we always will need heroes. I think that someone who steps up in a bad situation and does something not necessarily extraordinary, but puts something at risk for the benefit of others. Whether it's fighting a war or jumping in front of a moving vehicle to pull somebody out of the way. And, we had here in New York, we had a man who was, and some people called him an idiot, and I'm not one of them. But this man was standing with his two daughters on a subway platform. I don't remember how old they were, but they looked to have been about 11 or 12. And another man falls off the platform onto the tracks as the train's starting to come out of the tunnel. And the father, whatever he said to his girls, let go of their hands, jumped down, and pushed the man down into the well in between the tracks and held him down so that the train went over them. And both of them survived that.
Wow.
Now, the man he saved was mentally challenged. So his reaction time and so forth, he would not have been able to save himself. And the man that saved him, he had two responsibilities, one on either hand. He didn't have to do what he did, but he did. And so to me, people like that are not to be sneered at and called fools and idiot. And no one should say proudly, oh, I sure wouldn't have done that. Well, I tell you, if you'd been the guy who fell on the tracks, you damn well would have hoped that somebody did something. And if they didn't, what does that say about us? So I think people who help us remember where the bar can be, how far up it can go, who can inspire us to be better than we might have settled for, I think those are useful things in our lives, and they've always been there, and I think they should continue to be there. And so, whether it's a cartoon character, a comic book character, or it's a benefactor who helps education improve, or a woman who's taking care of children that are not her own, but she doesn't want them to suffer. Whatever it is, that's a good thing to have in our lives, and it speaks of a quality of life we should not cast off easily. Certainly without a fight, not without a fight.
Indeed. Indeed. All right. Well, I don't want to keep us going too much longer, so we've got one last question.
Okay.
So, what is it like bringing together Kids Comic Con and your educational workshops? Because reading some of the stuff, like the one interview you had, it sounded like there were a lot of bumps on the way getting there. Put it lightly.
Yeah, yeah, there are. It's all worthwhile, though. I'll say that right at the beginning. The very beginning of this, you talked about challenges that I seem to, seek them out and stuff like that. And maybe, like I said, I tried to explain how my head works. But once again, it comes down to certain things should exist. They should be there. They should be available. And if they're not, and you believe they should be, but you don't do anything about it, then I think you're lacking. So I would have been lacking if I believed as much as I did that there should have been this event for families, for kids, that kids should have had an opportunity to create their own stuff and learn from people who are doing it, day to day, how to do it, and see how this can help you not only from an entertainment standpoint, it can keep you amused or happy or thrilled or exercise your mind, but also it can help you look at the future and understand why what you're learning in school could be useful to you. And maybe this can even help you learn in school. So if I believed all that and then didn't try to do something to support it, to me, it would make me a hypocrite. So initially, I just tried to get other conventions, the ones who had deep pockets and so forth. Hey, just have a kids' corner at your event, a small area where this could go on. And Wizard took over Chicago Con years ago, and they let me do it there that first year. And it was a big success, but after that, they changed their mind. Then ECBAC, which is the East Coast Black Age of Comics Convention. That's in Philadelphia. I think they're in their, forgive me, Yumi, if I get this wrong. I believe they're in their 13th or 14th year. But back in the first couple of, I think it was like the third year that they were doing it, and I went there. I did this kids' corner for them. They loved it, and they've continued to do it every year because they understand the value for kids in the community. Some of the other conventions couldn't get them the least bit interested. And so I was lucky enough to meet Eugene Adams, who was the director of educational outreach at Bronx Community College. He found me for one reason. We got to talking. I wound up doing workshops at different schools on creating comics. And then from that, he said, well, what else do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd love to do a seminar where your college students can see that this is a business as well and this is how it works. And he said, fine, let's do that. And that worked out really well. And then he said, well, what else do you want to do? And I said, well, to tell you the truth, I'd love to be able to do a comic convention that's a family friendly event. And just to show the industry that it can be done and it's worthwhile and there's a market for it. And he said, okay, fine. How do we do that? Which I love Gene for that. So we did it. And that 1 year was supposed to only be 1 year. I just wanted to do it to show it that it could be done. But by the end of it, it was so successful. The artists and publishers who were there were so thrilled and so happy. And the kids, I mean, we still have photographs from it of kids reading, just sitting in the middle of the floor in this huge space reading. They said, you got to do it again. So we've done it for 9 years now. And yeah, there's finding venues, there's finding volunteers, there's the mindset that as a vendor, as an artist, you can come here. We charge very, 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 very little for the tables compared to anything else. We almost don't charge anything at the door, or sometimes if we're underwritten, we can do it for free. But, the idea is if you're a vendor, don't come here expecting to make the kind of money you're going to make at Wizard Con or Chicago Con or New York Comic Con. It's not that kind of convention. I want you to make your money, but, it's not going to be the big bucks and people have big dollars to spend. But you have to be willing to talk to the kids. You can't blow them off because they didn't buy something off of your table. You have to be willing to share your thoughts with them, your information on how you do what you do, make them feel welcome, parents too if they have questions, because it's that kind of environment. It's a nurturing environment, but it's supposed to be fun. And so, we've had years where some people, well, they thought they could deal with that, but no, they came there with the same expectations. And when it wasn't working, you see the sour expressions, you had attitude problems, resources, because we're not making, any kind of real money from this whatsoever. We barely cover some of our costs. Sometimes we have to do it on a smaller scale than we would like to. Sometimes we don't have the programs printed because we don't have the money for it. So there's been money challenges. But I would still say that with all the challenges, whether it's volunteers or whatever, with all the challenges, it's still well worth doing, because you not only have the kids running around all excited and thrilled, you do have artists and publishers who are thrilled to see this and happy to be able to interact with the kids. And then you have what I consider myself blessed. You have the parents or grandparents coming up to you, and I mean, some with tears in their eyes, thanking you for creating an environment that they could afford to bring their grandchildren to or their children to, that the kids are having a good time, that they could connect with their kids at these things and do stuff together. And they go, I mean, you stand there and you know that what you did, whatever you went through, it served the people. And if you're not happy with that, then again, I think there's need for some counseling. you know I think that, if you don't feel good after that, then there's a problem. So like I said, I can definitely look back on 9 years of knowing that we've done a lot of good stuff, and we've been fortunate to work with not only a number of great comic book artists and publishers in the industry. DC has done stuff. They've donated things. Sequoia, who makes remarkable pens and brushes and things, professional art equipment, will donate things. So many. What was it? I don't want to call them Fat Boy. But that's what they turn. They turn out the paper comic book boards and things like that. They've donated things to us for years, and in particular, we have just really been fortunate to have artists from like Sesame Street, some of the actors from the show, come and do not only our main event, but two or three of them have traveled with us on
That's
our road
fantastic.
shows. Up to Massachusetts or to Buffalo, New York, or down to Florida. So literally, we're not only just talking about comics, but we're talking about other creative arts, talents, and skills that kids can get into or already are into, and now they get to see how some of this works, and they get to meet people they've seen on television. And this is all too cool, not to do if you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds amazing.
And look, I met you, through this,
Yeah.
so why shouldn't I be doing this, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm really glad that you're doing that out there because that's the thing. When I think about almost any media besides maybe TV, when I think about what's out there for kids, unless it's, like actual books or TV, there has been, I agree completely, there's been a recession of actual creative products for kids. There are a lot less games and there are a lot less comics for kids now. So it's good to actually see someone standing up and saying, here's how you made it. Here's some stuff your kids can actually enjoy. I'm glad to see that finally happening.
Thank you, thank you. And if I get my way, you'll hear about more good things that are being done by other people. Because we can't do it all. And that's a reality. But we do. I'm fortunate enough to know that there's an event called Kids Read Comics that does Comic Cons for kids and family in. Forgive me if I get this wrong. Dan Mishkin is in charge of that, and that's out in Chicago. I want to say Chicago or Detroit. Detroit. It's in Detroit. And right. And then there's Kids Love Comics, which Mark Mariano, who's been working with us for years, a great guy. John Gallagher, another sweetheart. These guys live in Jersey and Pennsylvania, and they've brought back Kids Love Comics, and they're doing events where they can in that sort of southern Pennsylvania region, but then, where else they travel. So the reality is that there's a lot of people out there who want to do things for kids or are doing things for kids. Maybe you don't get to hear about them, and I think we should make more of a righteous noise about that.
Hmm. Definitely. Definitely. And here's hoping a few
Okay,
more people know about it from this interview.
that works for me.
All right.
So if you want to know more about any of these things, we're on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. Blackjack is on Facebook, so I can send you links for those things. And then some of the other entities that I mentioned are out there as well, and you can look them up on Facebook or the web or Twitter, and see what else they're up to.
All right. Well, we're at the end of the interview, so at the end of all of my interviews, I like to let my interviewee ask me and or my audience a question. So if you got one for the viewers, or one for me, or for both, feel free to shoot it our way, Alex.
Well, I actually only have one question, and I think it sort of speaks to all the things we've been talking about. Um, the logic in economics is if people don't like what's happening, the best way that they can affect that is with their money, with their dollars. If you want more of something, spend the money when you see it come out. If you don't like something, don't buy it.
Hmm.
So my thought here, or my question is, in terms of the efforts that are being made to create more family-friendly material, not knocking everybody else out of the field, but just keeping that door open. Do you feel that your audience, or asking your audience, do you people want to see more family-friendly material? And that doesn't mean kitty kitty. It simply means the range of
Hmm.
material that can go from board books or little bitty comic books like Owly, which has no text at all the way up to action adventure stuff for teenagers, but is again more less gore, less intense sexual content and things like that, and that anybody can sit down and sort of enjoy with other members of the family, whatever the age range is. Would you like? Would you really like to see that kind of material? And if so, I'd love to hear about it. And if they know about any of other material like that, I'd love to hear about that as well.
Interesting. Well, let us know in the comments below, guys, what your feelings on it. And I can speak for myself when I say that, yeah, definitely, been trying to be supportive of this stuff because, like Darkfoot, which is not Blackjack, but it's actually this H.G. Wells style thing where you're on a jetpack. It's actually going to be one of the things I'm going to be reviewing this year, and also the
Cool.
books because my mom still loves to read children's books and stuff like that. So like Anya's Ghost, and I just got Nimona a little while ago. Try to actually find that stuff because there are a few things that still have managed to bridge the gap, like you said with Archie, and there's also Ratchet and Clank that has managed to survive from the PlayStation 2 all the way to it's one of the things people are most looking forward to on their PlayStation 4. It's just a simple game that anybody can play, but everyone's
Right.
really excited for that one. So, yeah.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear more about that, and more, like I said, from your audience about maybe
Yeah.
what else they know of, or what would they like to see.
So, let us know what you think, guys, and what particular family friendly things you like to do with your kids if you've been doing any. All right. I
Cool.
want to thank you, Alex, for your time today. It was great talking to you again.
Thank you. And please get Blackjack Second Bite of the Cobra, the graphic novel. Coming out as of July 15th. Please, please, please.
Oh, yeah. And also,
Okay.
be sure to keep an eye out for my review of the Blackjack, little bit kind of like slight bit of thriller horror anthology, the one with the Scottish werewolves. You can actually see it right up
Buried
there in the upper right.
Secrets.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
Blackjack Buried Secrets. Yes, yes, yes. Please. Yeah, I'd love to hear about that one. That came out last year, and I'd love to hear what you thought of it.
I'll be sure to send you a link. All right.
Okay.
You have a good day, man.
You too. Take care, everybody.